Thank you so much for the introduction, Norval. Today, I actually have the pleasure of introducing Magalie D. Austin. Maggie serves as the Senior Advisor to the Mayor and Director of the Office of Minority and Business Enterprises. In this role, she is responsible for the oversight, policy, and accountability of the city's MWBE program. Maggie previously served as the Chief Diversity and Industry Relationships Officer for the New York City Department of Design and Construction. In this role, she was actually responsible for managing the city's minority and women business enterprises program and served as the commissioner's representative to the built industry. Under Magalie's leadership, the Office of Diversity and Industry Relations created and implemented innovative solutions that increased the contract opportunities for minority and women-owned business entities, which ended up awarding over $2 billion in capital programs and projects, making the Department of Design and Construction one of the leading New York City agencies in contract awards to MWBEs. During Maggie's tenure, the Department of Design and Construction tripled the agency's MWBE utilization from 9.7% to 32%. I'm going to take a pause and really think about that and just think about what an impact that she has had on the industry. She's a recognized leader in this space and a subject matter expert, and in value of inclusion and empowering communities through economic development. This is why we asked Maggie to actually join us today for our discussion around the need of MWBEs during this time. Thank you so much. Maggie?
Thank you so much, La-Toya, for that introduction, and thank you for having me and for organizing this really important discussion today. So, as you stated, the mayor recently appointed me the Senior Advisor and Director of the Mayor's Office of MWBE, and it's truly an honor for me because the issue of equity and access to economic opportunity is a critical one and one that I am passionate about, especially at this time for minority-owned businesses. So for the past 6 years, I've worked with MWBEs at the New York Department of Design and Construction, which serves as the capital construction manager for the city of New York. And, we awarded a number, almost $2 billion in contracts to MWBEs and minority and women entrepreneurs. So although the MWBE program has been around for about 20 years, it was neglected until Mayor de Blasio made it a centerpiece of his administration. And in 2016, he created the Mayor's Office of MWBEs. And at that time, he set 3 goals as his priority, right? So first goal is awarding 30% of contracts citywide to MWBEs by fiscal year 2021, certifying 9,000 MWBEs and awarding $16 billion to MWBEs by 2025. And I can tell you today that I am extremely proud that we've reached the 30% citywide goal in this fiscal year as a city, which is incredible given where we started from. And with our partners at SBS, and Dynishal will talk about this later on, we've certified 9,600 MWBEs. And because of our success with the $16 billion goal, we increased that goal to $25 billion. So currently, since 2015, MWBEs have been awarded nearly $14 billion in contract awards, which is incredible. If I say, if the audience gets any message from this conversation today, it really should be that if you're an entrepreneur, you should really certify and you should think about doing business with the city because there are opportunities. if some of the benefits of certification, and I'm sure Dynishal will touch upon this, is that there's an MWBE database. There's a directory. So every contract that the city issues, we put a goal, an MWBE goal on it. And if you're not certified, the prime vendors will not be able to work with you because they don't get credit if you're not certified. So I really encourage that you certify. There are mentorship programs at both DDC as well as SCA that only certified MWBEs qualify for. And more importantly, I don't know if you've heard, but last year the state legislature increased the discretionary procurement amount for MWBEs only to $500,000. So if there's a $500,000 or less contract, if any city agency uses an MWBE, it's a discretionary procurement. It doesn't have to go through the regular procurement rules, and it's just an incredible tool for us to increase our MWBE utilization. So I truly encourage entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs, to think about certifying.
Thank you so much. It was extremely helpful just to hear some of the key goals that the city has in relationship to MWBEs and how we're trying to move forward, especially the fact that we were actually already able to reach more than 75% of that $16 billion goal. That's amazing. I would love to hear a little bit more about the additional steps that the city is taking to ensure that, we continue on that goal. We've increased it, but I'd like to see and hear a little bit more from you about what are some of the other either policy steps that we're trying to take to make sure that contracts can be awarded to MWBEs, or if there are additional goals in sight.
Sure. So when I first started in my previous position 6 years ago, one of the things that I did is I looked at the Local Law 1, that's the local law that authorizes the MWBE program, as well as our procurement laws. So just to see what the barriers are, right? So over the last 6 years and since 2016, with the leadership of Janelle Doris, who was my predecessor, the city has really tackled a number of those barriers. Mm-hmm. So, and which is why you see that we've been able to increase our procurement. I think one of the things that I know one of the things that I will do is I will be working with the top spending agencies to make sure that they are using all of the tools that are at their disposal that we have now. For example, the $500,000 discretionary. I mean, this is such an incredible tool. You can literally, within less than a month, you can award a $500,000 contract to an MWBE. So that's one of the things that we're going to do. My office will work closely with the top spending agencies. We've identified 10 of them, and we're also going to make sure that that top agencies use all of the enforcement tools that we have under Local Law 1. So one of the things that I've found is that prime vendors, you put a subcontracting goal on a contract, and they have to make what's called a good faith effort to meet that goal. Mm-hmm. And I know prior to my arrival at DDC, that good faith effort was never, it wasn't something that was ever examined. So when I started, I held prime vendors to task. This is a contractual obligation. If you agree to do this work, that means that you agree to the goal that we set in the contract, and you have to make a good faith effort to meet that goal. And the law specifies what amounts to a good faith effort. And if they don't make that good faith effort, we have enforcement provisions, including liquidated damages that we can charge. And we use that as a deterrent so that prime vendors don't say, well, I don't really have to meet that goal because nobody's holding me accountable. So that's definitely one of the tools that we will be using, and we will be making sure that agencies use that tool. And then the other thing, and we'll be working with small business services to identify areas that the city procures in and that there aren't a lot of MWBEs, and making sure that we reach out to MWBEs in those areas, get them to certify, or maybe if they're, and if somebody's interested, get them trained so that they could certify. So there are a number of areas where the city, the procurement is really, really rich, and there aren't that many MWBEs, and I think that's a lost opportunity for us.
Same. I would really love to, if possible, to be able to share at least what are some of these top agencies that you guys are planning to look into and really start partnering more to make sure that they are actually utilizing the different tools and enforcement mechanisms that you were mentioning before to have MWBE contracts. I know with the businesses that I've worked with in the past, some of them are just not sure where to even begin the process of which agencies to look at. If the process is separate for, say, the Department of Education versus some of the other standing agencies. And so really hearing a little bit more about where these businesses should focus their attention to actually look for proposals, I think will be really helpful as they assess what they can actually gain access to.
Yeah, so let me just start out by saying it's easy to find out what the city buys, right? You can go to nyc.gov. You can look at the city agencies. You could also go to the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, and every year city agencies have to submit a spending plan, a procurement plan, to show what they're going to buy. So it's really easy. Or you can go to each agency's website to see what they're planning on buying.
Yes.
So it's not a secret what we are buying, and some things make actual sense, right? Like so DOE, what do they buy? They buy food because they feed the kids. They buy a number of different services that they provide to kids. They contract out with bus drivers to drive the kids, to pick up kids, because that's a function that's contracted out. So it's very, very easy to find out what agencies procure. NYCHA, it's the same, right? NYCHA does a lot of construction procurement. They, carpenters, people, who can fix boilers, which is a huge issue. So it's very, very easy to find out. And if you have a service that you feel that you can provide, I would say the first step is to go to SBS, because New York City's Small Business Services, they're the ones who certify. And part of the certification process is you have to identify the service that you provide. And it's called an NIGP code, right? And you identify that the service or services that you're qualified to provide, so that whenever we're looking for that service, when we do a search of the directory, then your company's name comes up as an option. So this company provides the service that we're looking for. So for me, that's the place that I would start. And you could also reach out to agencies individually. I know when I was at DDC, I received every day I would receive emails saying, my company does this. Is this something that you're in need of? And then I would point them in the right direction. I had a staff member who was our lead outreach person, and that's all that she did was work with companies who are interested in doing business with us. So, in general, though, the city buys everything. The city buys virtually everything.
Yes.
And he has a $90 billion budget, so it's a lot of money.
And this is why we believe that this is so important during this time for MWBEs, whether they're certified or not, to one, consider that certification so that they can actually gain access to that 90 billion. Because right now, as you saw, as you were stating, we're trying to get to that 30%, but that's the legal.
Right.
I would love.
And I have to tell you that in my conversation with the mayor before I accepted the position, I feel very strongly that 30% should just be a baseline. It's not a cap. 30% is a baseline. And I know in my former position at DDC, we set goals on contracts that were higher than 30%. So it's just a baseline. When you look at the numbers, so minorities and women make up 82% of this city. And, when we're looking, if we're targeting 30% of the contracting, it's just not right. I think we need some parity there.
I'm 100% in agreement with that. And we really want to make sure that, I believe the efforts that you stated would hopefully get us there, which involves both just information sharing so that businesses are aware of this, but also doing that targeted outreach in some of these really highest spending industries. That's something, yeah.
That's exactly, and I always say that this sort of work, whether it's supplier diversity, which is really what it is, or diversity and inclusion, does not happen organically. Don't let anybody tell you that it's going to happen on its own. It's purpose-driven work, and you have to have people who work on this every single day, and and every contract in each agency makes a difference, every single day.
Agreed. I would also love to add another layer to this, because I believe that there are multiple different segmentations as we're looking at MWBE contracts, plus just like the actual awardment. We are definitely increasing in the goal, and I'm so happy to hear that. But we do have multiple different neighborhoods as well as communities throughout New York City where I'm pretty sure that the MWBE certification amount is definitely not represented. How many actual MWBE companies and enterprises exist in those locations, especially within the outer boroughs. The Bronx, which is my home, definitely comes to mind as I think about just their access and what their actual procurement is like in the city. So I would love to hear a little bit more from you in regards to what is the city trying to do in order to make sure that there's not only diversity in regards to people who do each contract, but also diversity and parity across all the world to make sure that multiple different locations are happening.
Sure. So one of the things that I definitely will be focusing on is addressing what we call the disparity within the disparity, right? So we did reach the 30% goal as a city for the first time this year. But when we examine the numbers, the data, there definitely is the disparity in the companies that are being awarded the contracts. And what I discovered, especially at my agency, African Americans, especially African American women, were not doing well at all. And then next were women of color in general. So what I started doing, the local law 1, which is the law that authorizes us to run this mentor program, local law 1 authorizes us to set specific goals, specified goals on contract, meaning a goal for African Americans, goal for African American women, goal for so at DDC over the last 6 months, that's what we've been doing. Instead of saying to the prime, we set a 30% goal on this contract and you can meet it with whoever you want. What we did is, so we have a 30% goal. Of that 30%, 15% should be, African American women, because we've done the research and there is capacity. There are enough companies available to provide this service. So make sure that 15% of your goal goes to African Americans. And so that's what we started doing. So we're definitely gonna focus on doing that, and we're gonna go even deeper because we have the data by borough, and making sure that we target companies to certify in the outer boroughs. And once they're certified, making sure that if there's a project going on in, let's say, in Bronx, right, then making sure that the prime vendor reaches out to local companies to subcontract out to make sure that the community where that money is being spent retains some of that money.
Thank you so much for that. And that's definitely something that we've been trying to determine in regards to not only certifying as an MWBE, but if companies should actually dual certify as an MWBE plus an actual LBE, so a locally based enterprise, to make sure that they are considered for both different types of contracts.
Right. Right. And we also are focusing on, it's not part of my office, but the mayor's office is focusing on local hiring too, which is extremely important.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. I guess the next thing, I know you've already talked a little bit about like some of the key initiatives that you're trying to do in this new role and how you're trying to take this step forward. And that definitely is in regards to working closely with FPS in regards to the actual outreach to make sure that companies are certified, plus actually working on the actual procurement side with the city to make sure that the different agencies are utilizing the actual database that you mentioned and providing real concrete justification if a waiver is provided.
Right.
Are there any other, I guess, key priority areas and initiatives for you within the next upcoming fiscal year? We're about to enter a new fiscal year, July 1, and I want to make sure that businesses are aware of just like what are some of the priorities that are coming
Sure.
up.
So I think in this post-COVID environment where minority businesses who tend to be more fragile than non-minority businesses, we need to take extra care, right? So one of the things that we're discussing is perhaps instilling a policy of MWBE first, so that agencies, when they're looking to procure something, they need to look at an MWBE first and have to justify why this contract is not going to an MWBE. So that's one of the things, especially now. I mean, New York City is made up of small businesses, right? It's a neighborhood, I go to my neighborhood restaurants, which is a small business. If you want to go get a manicure, that's a small business. Think of all the hair salons in Harlem. So I think we need to make sure that we preserve those businesses and that they're in a shape where they can thrive post-COVID. So that's what this administration is looking to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having this dialogue with me and really sharing what the priorities are for the administration going forward. I believe that everybody on this actual conference are very, very interested in hearing just like how can they continue to thrive, especially as you said, during this post-COVID period when there's just so much uncertainty and many businesses are just trying to catch up to get back to where hopefully they were prior to.
Right.
And what
and can I also say that, one of the things that we've done over the last few years is making sure that access to capital is not a barrier to contracting with the city. So any company that has a contract with the city can apply for a loan up to $1 million, and it's at 3%. And it's really just an incredible thing. So access to capital should not be an issue for you not to be able to get a contract, right? So, this administration has really been at the forefront of these tools to make sure that MWBE succeed with us.
Well, thank you so much for that, as well as that additional piece of information. I'm sure Dynishal during her presentation will go through some of the key trainings and opportunities that MWBEs have, both pre-certification and post-certification, just to make sure that they are aware of what do they have access to, and really disclosing that information. Good.
Right.
Perfect. And now we'll just take a pause, and then if you can go into your closing statement, that'll be showed at the end of the symposium.
Yep. So thank you so much, La-Toya, for having me and for allowing me to be part of this incredible discussion. So, as I stated in the beginning, I truly believe in equity through economic empowerment. I'm an immigrant. My family left Haiti in the 60s, and I grew, I was born in Haiti, and I saw how economic empowerment actually helped my own personal family. And, that's why I decided to go into this line of work. And, one of the messages that I really want everybody to get is that we are here for you. We want to make sure that the city is an equitable and just city for everybody and for all of the communities. Black and brown people are not doing well. Our companies are doing better than they were 7 years ago, but they're still not where they should be. And my goal is to make sure that all MWBEs who want to work with the city and who have a service that they could provide, they have an opportunity to work with us. Thank you.
It is now my great pleasure to actually introduce Dynishal, who is the Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Economic and Financial Opportunity at the New York City Department of Small Business Services. In her role, Dynishal oversees a dynamic team committed to promoting equity and financial opportunity for minority and women-owned businesses, as well as other underserved businesses. The division is responsible for the city's certification of minority and women-owned business enterprises, or MWBs, as we've been mentioning thus far, and other certifications. In addition, the Division of Economic and Financial Opportunity offers technical assistance and capacity building programs to assist and strengthen these MWBEs, which Dynishal will go through a bit more in her presentation. Dynishal oversees units charged with compliance with equal employment opportunity, labor standards, and regulatory mandates. In her role as a public servant over the past 5 years, she has been a member of the New York City Council, including serving as the Director of Legislation and Budget for the chair of the Committee on Small Business Businesses, and nearly 2 years as the Assistant Commissioner for Business Programs at SBS. She holds a BA in African American Studies from Cornell and an MPA from Baruch, as well as a JD from Columbia University School of Law. Dynishal is here today to really discuss a bit more about the actual certification process and those actual capacity building programs that we mentioned that are so important for MWBEs as they really think about how do they attain and understand the process for government contracting. It is now, as I said before, my pleasure to actually bring Dynishal on to share her presentation.
Thank you, La-Toya. Thanks so much, and thanks so much for including me. Thank you to all the members of the Black MBA Association, the New York chapter, and all across the country who may be tuning in, as well as friends that you've connected to this event. We're certainly grateful for this opportunity. The list of panelists today is a mini lesson in New York City civics. You first heard from Magalie Austin, who leads the Office of Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprises at New York City Hall, and my role as a Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Small Business Services as part of the mayoral agencies who administer the programs that City Hall leads from a policy standpoint. So I'm going to be talking to you about how we operationalize the city's commitments to the MWBE program, because in order to interact with the program and benefit from these opportunities, our agency has created the portals that you will walk through and the supportive services that will aid you as you attempt to engage in city contracting. So I'll just move through this deck and then take questions. I hope this is comprehensive and useful to all of you. So certification just refers to the process that we use for verifying who owns, operates, and controls a business in order to establish that that business is eligible for participation in our MWBE program. Like all MWBE programs, ours is created through law. In our case, a local law passed through the city council, and the only firms that can participate are those that are included in those statutes. And that means we want every eligible firm in the program, and we can't let in any firms that are not eligible. And so the process of making those checks and verifications is what we refer to as the certification process. And I describe it as a show and tell process. You're going to tell us about your firm, and then you'll provide documentation that allows us to verify and have a strong record to show that we did our due diligence in determining which firms could participate in the program. Why does the government enter into contracts with private businesses? In short, we can't do it all. Operating the city of New York, meeting the needs of the public, meeting the needs of the city requires partnership. And we enter into public-private partnerships through contracts to the tune of more than $20 billion annually. And we need partnership with firms that do everything that the city needs to help educate the city's school children, to help provide supplies to the city's hospitals, to help pave the city's streets and plant the trees that make the air breathable, to provide the marketing that allows us to reach New Yorkers with our public services, to do the construction that allows city infrastructure and city buildings to operate for the public good. And so we cannot do it alone. Public-private partnership is a key way that the city meets its public charge. In addition, there are benefits to your firm for certification. I think it's worth asking why you, as a business owner or a prospective business owner, would want to consider government certification. And the government is a great customer. We may be a complex customer, but we're a customer that ultimately pays its bills. And even, for example, at a time of emergency, such as the COVID-19 emergency, the city has been engaging in public-private partnerships, contracts to be sure that the city had the goods and services that were needed to respond to the COVID-19 emergency. There were needs for new technology as the city had to pivot to working from home, need for personal protective equipment for city employees and to share with the public. There were needs for medical equipment, needs for cleaning supplies, needs for any variety of services. And if you are a government vendor, you were critical to us in meeting these needs at that time. In fact, this is, the story of this public health emergency has also been a big procurement story. And as a business that might have been faced with closure or the need to pivot, having New York City as a customer has been key to the survival and the actual ability of firms to continue employing New Yorkers during this emergency. So if you want to have the city of New York as a customer and you're eligible for MWBE certification, you should take advantage of it, because certification is a way to stand out from a very large and competitive vendor pool. And in fact, MWBEs get priority access to small contracts. So those are contracts below the discretionary threshold, which right now in New York City is $500,000. And that is a significant level of contracting for a small business. In addition, we're going to provide services to help you demystify government contracting. My team is going to be your helpful guide into this procurement system, so you won't have to go it alone. And we'll do that through education programs, the financing programs that Maggie talked about. In fact, during this COVID emergency, for firms that that needed contract financing loans to perform an emergency contract, we were able to reduce the interest rate from 3% to 0%. So we are always tuned into the needs of our MWBE community and responding nimbly to those needs as they transform, so that those public-private partnerships can work for the city and work for you. And in addition, certification is a verification of your leadership as a person of color at the helm of your business. And that can be very useful to marketing your firm, not just to government buyers, but to other potential customers that care about diversity and want to know that they're doing business with firms that are owned, operated, and controlled by women and or people of color. So here's a little bit about the certification process in a nutshell. I'm going to tell you about who's eligible for our program so that you can determine whether or not your business is eligible. If you determine that you believe you are eligible, then it's worth taking the next steps, and we're going to help you get through it. So you'll first register as a potential vendor to the City of New York through the payee information portal, and then you'll register with one other system called Passport, where you'll select the good and service codes that describe what your firm does. What goods do you sell? What services do you provide? Then you'll gather the supporting documents, which I'll also briefly review. You will complete the certification, and it's an online application. It's user-friendly. You can do it on your own, or you can request support to get through the application. If we have questions about your documents or your responses, we want you to answer those questions. We're doing our due diligence to make sure we have a strong record for the decision we'll make about your firm's eligibility, and you'll get certified. When you come into our program on our standard application, you're certified for 5 years, and you'll provide annual updates as needed so we can verify your eligibility also through our online system. So who is eligible for certification as an MWBE in the City of New York? Only for-profit businesses are eligible. Not-for-profits cannot be certified. The business can be located in New York City or have another connection to the New York City market. For example, you're located in New Jersey, but a substantial amount of your clients are in New York City. Or you have registered in the payee information portal and been assigned a vendor number. So you just have to have a connection to the New York City market. You need not be located within the 5 boroughs, but if you are, that's sufficient. The business must be majority owned, operated, and controlled by a person or persons who is a citizen or permanent resident and who is either Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, Asian Indian, or a woman. And actually, I need to update this slide because Native Americans are now included in our program, and that is a recent change. And finally, your firm needs to have been conducting business for at least 1 year. It doesn't necessarily have to be a year since you created the formal entity. If you were working as a sole proprietor or informally or with another firm and then went out on your own, as long as you've been kind of plying your trade for a year, you meet the 1 year in business requirement. Okay, so you've considered all of those criteria and determined that you are eligible for certification. The next step is to register in our vendor systems. So that's PIP and Passport. And assuming that we're going to distribute this deck, I've hyperlinked these here, these websites here, but the critical thing to remember is that built into the certification application are links and supportive guidance to help you successfully interact with these systems. And I also have a staff that is very skilled in helping you register in PIP and Passport. So you'll go to PIP either on your own or with our help, get assigned a vendor number, and begin to set up how you'll get paid once you contract with the city. And then you'll navigate to Passport and select the NYBLACKMBA codes that will represent your firm in our online directory, which is how we market you to city buyers. Once you've taken registration steps, you need to gather your supporting documents. And here's a document checklist that just is an overview of the types of documentation you'll need to upload depending on the type of entity that you have formed. I will tell you that many businesses have the hardest time with a tax return. So if you have not filed your taxes for 2018, at least show that you've gotten, that you're taking advantage of an extension and give us your prior year's taxes. But if you're just delinquent in having filed your taxes, or if your personal taxes don't reflect business income, that's something we can talk through with you. But it's a reasonable set of documents. You need to have them saved to your computer so that you can upload each of them appropriately named as a PDF to the online application system. So that's resume, a bank signature card. That's a way of showing financial control. Tax returns. We need to know that you meet the citizenship or residency requirement. Any licenses or permits that may be required for your business. A lease agreement showing where you operate your business and that you control that space in some way. We want to see that you have contracts that you have signed or invoices that you have signed. Again, this goes to control. If you are a brand new business, that is not a fatal flaw. We need to see some proof of ethnicity, and this can be challenging for African Americans. Look to any government documentation. It might be a voter record. It could be a driver's license, a passport, depending on where you're from, a birth certificate. And if you cannot find it in your own documents, we can look back 2 generations to your parent or grandparent. And finally, we can go to an affidavit if that's necessary. So if this is a challenge for you, it is not, again, it's not meant to be a hurdle that you cannot scale. It's just a way of protecting the program, and we can help you if it's difficult for you to come up with a piece of documentation that shares that you're African American. And then we want to know how the business was capitalized. We want to know that your money was used to either start the business or that you bought into the business with your own resources, ownership, operation, and control. And then the additional items are listed there depending on the type of entity you have created. So once you've done that, you're ready to hit the online application process. It looks like the website where you're going to go is sbsconnect.nyc.gov. And I'm going to move through some slides that display that application very quickly. Just like setting up an account on any website right now, you need to first create an account if you haven't interacted with the system before. And there's a little email volley so that you can confirm that you are in fact the person who you claim to be. And then once you navigate back to the site, you've created your own username, your password, you verify that with your email, you're going to come back to the site and choose apply for MWBE certification. And then it will go through a series of questions that are very much like the eligibility criteria that I just shared with you. And notice that on each page, the hyperlinked blue text connects to explanations or support. So you will not be able to begin the application unless you can answer yes to each of these basic eligibility questions, which I reviewed with you. And then you're going to tell us about the legal structure of your business so we can generate the correct list of required documents. You're going to tell us your tax ID and your vendor number because you went to PIP and selected a vendor number. If you didn't do that first, this link to help with the NYC vendor number will connect you with PIP. If you don't yet have an EIN and you're operating under your own social security number, you'll share that here. And then you're going to give us a business description. This is the place we want you to be really clear. This text is used for searching, so you want to use terms that are likely to be used by a purchaser seeking your service. And make sure there's no typos, make sure it represents you well. Again, same thing if you have a website, don't send us to a page that's under construction. This, there's limited information in the online directory to help a potential government buyer understand that your firm is the one that it should choose. And so you want to take some care and also make sure that the email and phone number here will actually reach someone who will be responsive to inquiries from potential government buyers. So assign these contact roles carefully. It can all be one person, that's fine. And then once you go through all the application questions, it's going to ask you to upload the supporting documents that are required for your business type. And the great thing about SBS Connect is it acts as a secure cloud storage. All of this is backed up by Microsoft Dynamics. It's on the government platform. It's very secure. And say you need to access those tax documents or that bank letter at a later time, you can do that by logging into SBS Connect and pulling it down. So it will act as secure cloud storage for your important business documents, as well as allowing us to access them. This request for an addendum is if you want to use your application to the City of New York to apply to any of our partners, such as the State of New York. This allows you some administrative efficiency. You don't have to do their full application. It does not save time necessarily in their processing because you will wind up in the queue in the position at which you enter it. But it is a great way to apply for those certifications a bit more quickly. And then finally is the certification affirmation. We want you to read this closely, understand your obligations, to be honest, to provide a commercially useful function on contracts that you enter into, to update your record if you should become ineligible, say your firm merges with another firm and you're no longer the majority owner. You've got an obligation to share that with us in a reasonable period of time. And assuming that you agree with the terms and conditions, you're going to submit your application. If at any point in the process you run into trouble, you're going to click the support option and reach out to our IT department. These aren't robots, these are real people, and they will assist you. Either our certification team, say you forget your login or your link doesn't arrive, go navigate to the support tab on SBS Connect, and we'll be able to help you with that. So you've applied for certification. It will take us a few weeks to review the application and process it. If the certification analyst has questions for you, please do respond to those promptly. That will help us process your application in a timely fashion so we can get you in line for these contracts, which is what we really want. We refresh the online directory twice a month. And so if you get, say you get certified on the 16th of the month, you should be reflected in the online directory refresh that happens at the end of the month or the first of the next month. And then city buyers can confirm that you're certified and consider you for opportunities. If you run into questions and they're not IT questions, but eligibility questions, or you're not sure if something applies to you, call our certification hotline, 212-513-6311, or you can also write our MWBE inbox, mwbe@sbs.nyc.gov. And that concludes this part of the presentation. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Dynishal, thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation. It was extremely helpful to really hear just how much SBS is doing to help businesses understand the certification process and just how much of a resource your agency is to people who are looking for certification, plus those who are actually looking to attain contracts from the city and all the different capacity building initiatives that you guys have available. As our audience is really thinking through, how to actually go about this process, how to actually put through a really effective and viable application, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about what are some of the common pitfalls or errors that you guys have seen both in reviewing certification documents as well as in the actual proposals, if you guys get a chance to see those that MWBs typically make. I think being aware of some of the common errors that might discount people and actually make the process a bit longer for them in regards to the certification side, or completely disqualify their proposal, would be really helpful for our audience as they think through what exactly they should be doing and how to put their best foot forward.
So I will say on the certification side, it really is small technical problems in the application. In terms of omissions, it tends to be paperwork showing the capitalization of the business. We want in some way for the owner to verify that if a financial investment was required in order to start the business or for them to assume majority ownership of the business, that they can verify that in some way. So I'll give you an example. Say you're a consultant and you want the service you want to sell is expertise that you have gained in a profession of working in corporations or for others, and there's not major equipment or office space that you're investing in, but you had to buy a new laptop. Just show us the receipt for the laptop. We want to know that you own it. If you are operating in shared space, we want to know that there's not an entanglement with an ineligible business. That means that you are not actually owning, operating, and controlling your firm. So we're not looking for a magic amount of investment. We just want to be able to verify that the woman or the person of color, the Black, Hispanic, Asian individual or group of individuals have made a financial investment into the firm, that they're sharing in the profits and the debts of the firm. So it could be loans that you took out. That tends to be probably, a difficult thing for folks to get their head around. So I'm trying to, explain it very clearly, because that is something that's very critical. And in terms of proposals, I would say that, the city needs what it needs. What the city needs changes, but the city is not necessarily always a client that is looking for a firm to make a creative pitch for something novel. The critical thing in succeeding in government procurement is to understand the need as expressed in that solicitation document. Just like as in the deck, I asked you to consider your eligibility in advance. Make an honest assessment of if you can provide that good on the specs, the timelines, the quantity, the quality that the city is asking, or the service in the way that they're asking. And conserve your resources, because government business development can be expensive for a small business. When you commit time to applying for a solicitation, you want to know that you have a reasonable chance of winning. So clearly read that document, make a real assessment of whether you can meet that, and if not, look for the next opportunity rather than trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And I can say that we do provide technical assistance to vendors MWBE vendors who are bidding on city projects, to be sure that your response is technically correct and that you've considered all of the costs that can help with your pricing. So, for example, the city may require a higher level of insurance than you've had to carry in the past because of liability concerns. And so we want you to understand that addendum to the solicitation document, explaining the insurance requirements, and price your proposal so that you are growing through that city contract. We want government procurement to be a route to growth for the firms that participate. We don't want any firm to be harmed by contracting. And so if you don't consider the costs of government contracting in your pricing of your proposal, that can harm the firm. So we will provide up to 3 technical assistance sessions on each solicitation that a firm applies for, so that you can be sure to have a solicitation that includes those costs and is technically correct.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's extremely important for multiple businesses to actually hear and understand a bit more about how do you just put your best foot forward, especially businesses that are looking to actually transition into the space for the first time.
Yes.
If they've never submitted a government contract, it's going to be extremely difficult to understand, how do I switch from maybe my retail business to actually government contracting, which might be a larger amount, which has different timelines. And so just thinking through that process and what's best fit for them is extremely important. I know you mentioned like the government has needs and it cannot do everything on its own. So there's definitely the need to actually contract with private companies, especially MWBEs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure one of the key things that many of the people in this audience today are really considering is my industry like one of the top ones that might get a contract? If you can give us a little bit more insight about like some of the industries right now that just don't have good MWBE representation, and therefore they might be able to be at the forefront, or if they aren't certified, really should think about getting their certification. I think that that'll be extremely helpful for everybody in today's symposium.
Great. The city buys a lot in the IT sector, both goods and services. And so if your firm is a provider of IT services of any kind, that's an area where we're certainly seeking more diverse vendors. The cities will always spend a great deal on construction and construction managers, architects, and engineers. So we have representation in our pool, but not from every segment of our MWBE community. And so we're certainly looking for new folks who can help the city with its major infrastructure projects, its investment in transportation systems, its investment in storm preparedness and making a more resilient and green city. Certainly those areas are areas for growth for our MWBE program. And then, the city's needs do change. The city had new procurement needs as part of its COVID response. I mean, the hospital systems were buying masks, but the city is buying masks, cleaning supplies, gloves, thermometers, things like that in new quantities now. And so I always encourage businesses, watch the news, listen to the news of what the city council is voting out. Look at what the state is kind of passing down for the city and consider where the business opportunities lie when those policy or program changes happen. And there will be firms that benefit or support the city in making those changes.
Thank you so much for that, Dynishal, and really sharing your insight around how do you really go through this process and really some of the things to consider. Plus, I believe with that last tidbit, how do you kind of understand the market and what's coming down the pipeline, which was extremely important for any business owner, whether they're going to be contracting with the city or contracting with other people or bringing new supplies into their retail environment.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our session on the need for MWBEs, especially during this time. I want to thank all of you for being in attendance and hearing both of our presenters and actually learning more about the process, since it's so important for minority and women-owned business owners, especially businesses of color, to go about this contracting process. I know you've heard a bit more from Dynishal around the steps in order to actually get certified. So I actually encourage all of you to start that process if you haven't done so already. And if you are certified, please look for contracts at the city. You heard from Maggie how you can actually look to see what exactly the government is procuring. As we go into this new fiscal year, this is the time for us to take an initiative to make sure that the funding of the city and your taxpaying dollars are going to people of color throughout all the 5 boroughs. So I'm actually leaving you all on this call with that charge to really start taking action and understand how can you gain the funding that you need in order to continue to grow and support your business. In addition to our presenters today, we had an amazing team, both from the Office of the Minority Women-Owned Business Initiative at City Hall, as well as the Department of Small Business Services, that really helped to make sure that you all had the information that you needed today. So I would love to give a special thanks to all of those who helped make this session actually possible. And that includes from our Office of MWBE at City Hall, Alana Long, Saba Hazel, Shannon Wright, as well as Wayne Lambert. I would also love to thank our new commissioner, John Aldoris, who has definitely shown support for our MWBEs during his time both at City Hall as well as in his new position as commissioner. He has definitely showcased that businesses of color are a key initiative that he wants to actually put forward for SBS. But I would definitely be remiss if I didn't also thank the former commissioner, Greg Bishop, who also worked on this MWB initiative for multiple years and was my commissioner while I was at SBS. So my special thanks to both of you and all the continued work that you're all doing on this initiative to actually help MWBEs move forward and actually grow. For that wonderful discussion, as well as just sharing all of that information. I would love to thank our two presenters and ask everybody in attendance should join me in thanking Magalie D. Austin, who is the Senior Advisor to the Mayor and Director of the Office of Minority and Business Enterprises, along with Dynishal, who is the Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Economic and Financial Opportunity at the New York City Department of Small Business Services, for sharing their knowledge and expertise and being 100% candid with us about how we can continue to grow opportunities for MWBEs in New York City. My name is La-Toya Niles once again, and it was definitely a pleasure actually being in the symposium with all of these wonderful experts and these leaders, as well as hearing from you in regards to the assistance that you need. It's been a wonderful discussion, and I'm happy that I was able to be a part of it, both as the co-director of business development for the Metro chapter of the National Black MBA Association, and as the founder, as well as lead principal consultant for Altair Consulting, which is my business, which, trust me, I fully intend to have it certified as an MWBE by the end of this year. Thank you so much. And please look forward to the rest of the discussion during this symposium.